Assalamu alaikum, you're watching Views and News and I'm Faisal Rehman live from our Islamabad studios. Today we'll be talking about the Pakistani effort for regional peace and prosperity. As we all know that this 48th OIC moot was held in Islamabad on the 22nd and 23rd of March, I think one of the greatest achievement of the current government, where more than 32 foreign ministers along with around 800 foreign delegates were a part of this moot. So we'll be talking about that in detail in our today's program. But before that, our production team has prepared a report. Let's watch that first.
Pakistan's successes in the regional and global diplomatic maneuvers in recent years are now being recognized and acknowledged by the world's powers and states. Pakistan's spirit of promoting interdependent regional as well as global development and prosperity, which led the nation to host the significant OIC meetings 2 times in less than a year, has shown the world Pakistan's assertive stance on multilateralism and regional peace. Moreover, the overwhelming response of all the OIC CFM participants in echoing the point of view of Pakistan on Islamophobia and peaceful resolution of Indian illegally occupied Jammu and Kashmir dispute as per the Security Council resolutions has shown that the world is very much recognizant that Pakistan is truly striving for a stable and peaceful region. On the other hand, Pakistan's concern on India's mistaken missile, which threatened regional peace, was also shared by all the OIC CFM participants in the Islamabad Declaration and showed that India has practically failed in diplomatically isolating Pakistan in the world. In this regard, China's statement is also very significant, in which it appreciated Pakistan's role in regional stability and pledged to further enhance diplomatic cooperation with Pakistan at all the levels. The appreciation was extended by Chinese Foreign Minister Wang Yi during meeting with Chief of Army Staff General Qamar Javed Bajwa. In this meeting, the Chinese Foreign Minister appreciated the security being provided to CPEC and said China believes in inclusive prosperity. He especially appreciated Pakistan's effort for hosting the OIC's 48th Council of Foreign Ministers Conference, as well as said that world should acknowledge Pakistan's effort towards regional peace and stability. Chief of Army Staff General Qamar Javed Bajwa termed OIC's 48th Council of Foreign Ministers session as a historic development for addressing the dire humanitarian situation in Afghanistan and bringing international community to a shared vision and joint strategy to find solution to emerging challenges in the region, vital for peace and stability. Mr. Wang Yi also appreciated the professionalism of Pakistan Army.
Now to talk about it, we'll be joined in by Syed Muhammad Ali from Washington D.C. He's an expert on international affairs. Thank you very much, Syed Muhammad Ali, for your time. Let's start off from you, sir. And since a couple of very important areas of discussion regarding this particular 48th session of the OIC. So generally, whenever we would listen to any Indian media channel or radio or perhaps any statement coming out from India, from their senior journalist or perhaps from their leadership, they would always talk about isolating Pakistan. And whether even at the top level, I've also heard the same statement coming in from none other than Mr. Modi, the Prime Minister of India. But now, sir, once Pakistan has held this moot at the top successful level, I would say, sir, your response to that?
Well, I mean, it is, it is an international moot, and I think some of the statements coming out of them were very reasonable, very balanced. For instance, saying that Pakistan wants to be party to any peaceful effort, cooperative effort, but doesn't want to get dragged into conflicts. And I think that is very important because in the Arab world, I mean, we still have a situation where, there is strife within the Arab world. Now some fences have been mended with Qatar and UAE and Saudi. But when it comes to Yemen, there's, then there's proxy warfare with Iran. So I think it's good signaling. And in the past, the Pakistani parliament also was wise in its decision, not to side with anyone. However, looking at it from afar, it's hard to deny the optics, right? I mean, while there's this mood happening, simultaneously, the country is in chaos, right? We do not know if there will be, if the current prime minister will be able to finish his term. And we've never had a prime minister. Yes, we've had two political parties, the two prior political parties complete their terms, but no prime minister has finished his term in its entirety, right? And we don't know the fate of the current government. So I think domestically, there, whenever one saw coverage of this, this was a point being made. The other issue, which was a bit disconcerting, so besides the positives and raising the issue of Palestine and Kashmir, and it's also interesting that we now, the new ambassador to the US, Mr. Masood Khan, has been appointed. In fact, on Monday, one's going to an event, at the embassy to look at sort of bilateral US-Pakistan relations. But the other sort of, possibility of having done things differently was when Pakistan brought in, to the OIC, the Chinese foreign minister, Wang Yi. And there was no need really to have done that, because the kinds of signals it sends. So immediately, I think the Uyghurs have criticized this. India has picked up on this. And also internationally, it creates a certain level of discomfort, and Pakistan doesn't need to come at the forefront. I mean, there are so many other countries, right? I mean, China as well has taken a stance, right? I mean, yes, it has shielded Pakistan from criticism, but was it with the Lashkar-e-Taiba that it acknowledged that, this is a terror group. So Pakistan doesn't, of course, it has a strong relationship with China, but it need not drag in China into forums where China does not have a space. I mean, it has individual relationships with the Gulf countries. I believe it was last year, where Pakistan spearheaded, in the UN, an endorsement of the One China policy. Now, that is something that, again, is problematic for Pakistan, because it creates a contradiction between, on the one hand, Pakistan endorsing the One China policy and then decrying India's One India policy, right? So I think that it's about the messaging, it's about the optics, and it's, to a certain degree, there's an element of schizophrenia in all foreign policy, right? But the need to sort of, to not only view these issues domestically, but sort of, being a bit objective and seeing the kinds of signals that are being sent out. And there are so many other forums, right? There's the SCO, right? I mean, the Shanghai Cooperation Organization, which is a relevant forum, because despite the irony of the massacres that the Russians committed in Afghanistan, now they are, involved, and they are a major stakeholder. So working with China, working with Russia in Afghanistan provides an alternative venue to Pakistan, rather than just engaging with the West. But I felt that there was no need to mix up, these different sort of foreign policy priorities.
All right. Now, we've also been joined in by Air Commodore retired Basit Raza, senior analyst. Sir, thank you very much for your time. Since earlier we were having a word about these statements coming in from India, especially, when they talk about isolating Pakistan, and they believe they have done that actually. Nobody supports us other than Turkey or perhaps China. But sir, after this particular moot, where 32 foreign ministers were present, along with 800 other delegation members, and looking at that, sir, I think this is a huge success for Pakistan. Your take on that?
Definitely, the OIC conference and the Islamabad declaration is a great diplomatic success for Pakistan. And in that forum, the appearance of China, the foreign minister of China, is a very big milestone, because Pakistan has always been trying for regional peace, and for overall peace in Muslim Ummah. And these efforts, we have seen that there was a dispute between Iran and Saudi Arabia, and Pakistan offered its services for mediation. And similarly, these days, when there is a dispute, in fact, there is a sort of lot of tension in Ukraine, and it's virtually there's invasion inside there. So again, Pakistan kept a neutral position, And the benefit of that was that we could offer our services for mediation, and that too in a background when the EU had actually made a very undiplomatic move in sort of talking things about Pakistan's not taking sides. So Pakistan's stance is very clear. If you take sides, in fact, we have been taking sides in the past. We have a long history, CETO, CENTO, and in Afghanistan we have got ourselves involved twice. So we have learnt a lesson, and the lesson is, in fact, there is a change in the foreign policy direction, that we will not be taking sides anymore. We are a neutral country. We work on our want to work on our economic progress, and I think this is the right thing to do.
We are walking on a neutral path. That is going to be a challenge and a half, by the way. So it won't be easy.
That's right. But actually, it's a new phase in our foreign policy. Let's see how it turns out. But I feel that under the present circumstances, it's what is required. Look at China, a very close ally of Russia, but on the Security Council, they didn't vote on the debate. They actually abstained. Yep. So that is the kind of restraint by such a mighty country shown in the world stage. So that's a good sort of reference to Pakistan, although Pakistan has its own independent foreign policy. But that is the way things are moving now. The era of blocks and the iron walls and this is gone. And now I think
it's more about cooperation now.
Bilkul, that's right. And I think Pakistan is right. And also we have seen one more thing, that just having Pakistan is an atomic power, but our say in the international affairs is very limited because of our economic weakness. So the lesson is that you have to be economically strong, and then you will be heard on international fora. And I think that situation is also quite obvious in Russia, in this Ukraine dispute, that Russia being a superpower in itself has not been able to make sort of that kind of shown that kind of success militarily in Ukraine, which you expect out of a superpower. So
a lot of resistance is there.
All these things are indicating one thing, that this era of taking sides and being part of blocs is gone. This is an age when we have to sort of be economic development is our priority, and being part of blocs is not important for us. We don't want to do that. And I think this is a good move in our give good direction.
Neutral foreign policy.
Yes.
So what sort of challenges do you see for Pakistan in the coming future? We'll talk about the domestic issues as well, so because they also in fact reflect about your foreign policy in one way or the other. So when you look at it, I think Pakistan has got a lot of recognition by not only by the Muslim Ummah, but I think at an international level, in the international arena, whether you talk about Europe or otherwise. I think things are moving in the right direction, aren't they?
That's right. Because a foreign policy doesn't yield results in days or months or years. Sometimes you have to wait. But you have to have a very clear vision where you want to go. And in that we wait patiently. And I think we moved out of this bloc politics, and for Afghanistan, peace in Afghanistan, our efforts were very outstanding. In fact, they were recognized by the whole world. And that's why that was the harbinger and sort of a precursor of peace in Afghanistan. If Pakistan had not played that role, I think still the war in Afghanistan might have been going on. So these are the kind of overtures which over the long run yield the peace. And I think this time Pakistan's role has been recognized by the world community also. And hopefully in future also, whenever there is an opportunity, Pakistan will play this role and
they really need to capitalize on that front also.
That's right.
Now coming back to you, Syed Muhammad Ali, I mean, when we talk about SAARC, that's a regional cooperation, that's I think the kind of trade it should have had, it's not even close to that. But look at the population, look at the demand, look at the supply, but nothing has been done on that front. A lot of countries blame India and Pakistan for that, because since these two countries have a very hostile relationship. So no other country is getting benefit from this particular cooperation. How to make sure that even organizations such as SARC, we have seen the role of SCO, that's very powerful. OIC finally did talk about Kashmir at length, did talk about Islamophobia also. These were the major concerns of Pakistan and also regarding Afghanistan. So in order to make sure that SARC becomes a body that should be progressive, that should be interdependent, and that should also yield results as far as the basic business, economy, and trade is concerned.
Well, I mean, SARC has been around for for so many years, and like you said, Faisal, I mean, it's the India-Pakistan rivalry, the two local hegemons in the region, which prevents SARC from achieving any kind of potential. I mean, let alone the possibility of a South Asian union. I mean, ours is one of the least integrated regions of the world. And while business communities on both sides, India and Pakistan, want to do business, right? And leaving aside the debate of sort of what that business will ultimately mean in terms of reducing poverty, because I mean business can also be very elite led, where the benefits don't necessarily trickle down. However, the fact remains that yes, I mean, it makes good economic sense, and it would bolster the economies of these countries. But the Kashmir issue again remains a major stumbling block, and India has cultivated relations with other regional countries, I mean, for good or bad, right? I mean, so when it went into Sri Lanka, for instance, during trying to mediate the Tamil problem, that became India's Vietnam. We saw Rajiv Gandhi having to pay the ultimate price for the blunder, the Indian intervention. Subsequently, Pakistan also tried to work with Sri Lanka, but it supported the Rajapaksa government, when it was brutally crushing the LTTE. So, I mean, both these countries try and work with, Pakistan and Bangladesh, still do not have normal relations. So India, has with Nepal, I mean, for good or bad, the more economic dependency. So it has, I think, gone beyond the regional mechanism, right, and tried to create those bilateral relationships with South Asian states. And we saw recently with the pandemic, right, where there was a sort of, there was a one-upmanship whether Pakistan should participate or not, and India was kind of dominating this, response, SARC-led response to the health pandemic. So there's certainly, need to do that, I mean, for health pandemics, for the environment, to address climate change. So, there needs to be data sharing, cooperation, thinking of these trans-border river systems, right, emanating from the Tibetan plateau, but, traversing Pakistan, India, Bangladesh, Nepal, and with climate change and the glacial melt, there is obviously need for this cooperation, but, one has not seen much of it. And what one is now seeing instead is China is kind of wooing away some of the smaller South Asian states, right, from Indian influence. So be it Nepal, be it Bangladesh, be it Sri Lanka with the Hambantota port, etc. China has, it's trying to create an alternative sort of, sphere of influence in South Asia, as India is trying to create in Southeast Asia, right? And it's sort of, it being a partner in the Indo-Pacific strategy. So there is this broader great game going on. I don't know, sitting, I mean, but I'm sitting far away, from Pakistan. So, perspectives vary when you're looking at something from the inside and something from the outside. But, in the conversations I have and when I look at this, I wonder if Pakistan is walking the fine line and balancing and not taking sides. I mean,
All right.
at least, I mean, in the US, the perception is that, Pakistan has already chosen its sides. And of course, I mean, the way the US has worked with Pakistan has been very counterproductive. So I'm certainly not defending the US position, but I don't know if Pakistan is and the illustration of sort of the earlier examples I gave with the Chinese foreign minister coming to the OIC. I mean, it might have been a demand by other Gulf states also, but I think this sends to the international community. It sends the message that Pakistan is entirely beholden to China.
And in one way or the other, it's true also. We've also been joined in by Kamran Yousaf, senior anchor person, senior journalist. Assalamu alaikum. Kamran sahab, assalamu alaikum.
Yes, assalamu alaikum.
Haji, good to have you in the show, ji. Thank you very much for your time. Since we were talking about the role of Pakistan as far as the regional peace is concerned, and in particular through regional cooperation, economic integration, and interdependence. Now, so when we look at our neighbors, whether we talk about Iran, Afghanistan, India, in particular, China is a different story altogether. So we hardly have any trade. A lot of smuggling, though, is taking place. But look at the overall bilateral trade numbers. I mean, honestly speaking, the kind of potential Pakistan and the neighboring countries, the kind of potential they have, they are not even utilizing that, even 5% of it.
Yes, exactly. I think this is a major problem, and one of the reasons that countries in this part of the region are facing common challenges, particularly when it comes to, Pakistan and India, this issue of poverty and unemployment. And the reason is because this is the least integrated region as far as trade and commercial ties are concerned. And I've seen one of the studies done by the World Bank that talked about the potential of bilateral trade alone between Pakistan and India to the tune of around $35 billion. But at the moment, that we have, trade, but that is being conducted through third country. And of course, that, makes it more expensive and, not to the benefit of people from both sides. So this is the key problem. And I think that is why, that we have seen in recent months and recent years, at least in Pakistan, there has been a greater emphasis from moving away from the geostrategic to geoeconomics. But of course, that will remain a pipe dream until and unless countries like Pakistan and India resolve their long-standing disputes, including Kashmir. So I think that is the major stumbling block. Until and unless we cross that hurdle, otherwise, this issue, remains, and we won't be able to realize the true potential of the economic integration in this region, could benefit from.
Now, Kamran, when we talk about the commercial and trade interaction, I think that is the most important one. Now, we have realized finally, even when we talk about the national security policy, we always thought that it is more or less about the external threat and the internal threat at some stage. But now economy, your food security, your water security, your environment, I mean, there's so many other aspects to it also. Now, moving from geostrategic concept to a geoeconomics concept, what sort of challenges do you see now will be in front of Pakistan?
I think the major challenge when it comes to, Pakistan, we have to understand that first, even as we speak, Pakistan is a country that is still struggling to have a sustained, political system. We have off and on this political instability. And when you have this kind of political instability, then you cannot have long-term policies, reforms, that can benefit or attract or transform Pakistan from being strategic to geoeconomics. So as far as Pakistan is concerned, the first thing that we have to do, we have to have, I believe, all the stakeholders, all the political parties should have a minimum bipartisan consensus on some of the issues. Because one of the reasons that if you talk to foreign investors, if you talk to diplomats, one of the reasons they say that Pakistan do talk about, ease of doing business, do encourage foreign investments, but they hardly, work on, streamlining, their system at grassroots level. Even today, a foreign company tries to invest in Pakistan, they have to go through with lot of, different hurdles, lot of bureaucratic hurdles, and these kind of things can only be addressed once you have a stable political system that can work on short, medium, and long term, and also, make sure that whatever policies that we evolve over the years, the incoming government just because of they simply don't like a certain person, they just simply reverse it. So I think it is important that we should first put our own house in order. Once we do that, and I'm sure then things will start happening. I think that is the major thing that we have to do. Start, I think, reforming from our home, and then, think of, a larger picture.
Absolutely, totally agree with you. Thank you very much, Kamran, for your comments. Now, Basit Saab, we need to put our own house in order. Yes, and there are so many aspects to it. Now, when we hear and when we see the top political leadership of Pakistan, sir, not even ready to sit and talk regarding various issues. So forget about the long-term planning or the short-term planning, because it was PMLQ served for almost 5 years, 2002 till 2008. There were two prime ministers, Jamali Saab, may Allah bless his soul, and then Shaukat Aziz Saab. Then we saw Pakistan People's Party, again, sir, two prime ministers. It was Gilani Saab and then Raja Parvez Ashraf Saab. Then we talk about PMLN, we had two, Nawaz Sharif Saab and then Syed Abbasi Saab. And again, we are not very sure what is going to happen in the coming weeks ahead of the PTI's government. What I'm saying is, sir, that don't you think that, when we talk about the long-term economic policy or any issue for that matter that has to have consensus, that consensus seems to be missing, sir. Secondly, the moment the next government takes charge, most of these policies are reversed. So one step forward and two steps back, that's what we are doing at the moment, sir. Do you think this is the way forward? I mean, this is not the way forward, because nothing is going to happen if we will follow this. Political stability, don't you think, is the key?
It's a very difficult question, because this is the domain of the politicians. And we have an example.
I've given you the example of the last 20 years.
That's right. Actually, we see that we all talk of democracy and how important it is for any country. But in our country, a democratic setup has not yielded the kind of results which is expected out of a democracy. If we see that, unfortunately, the most of the progress or a major portion of progress has been made in the military leadership when it was here, because they have that much time to sort of implement that policy. Actually, for economic betterment, short-term measures can only give you instant results. But what actually you need is the structural changes, because the present structure
reforms
has not been conducive for promotion of industry, for promotion of business and things like that. And the world is changing now. Look at it. Any country who progresses, it progresses on two things: iron and steel and petrochemicals. And as far as we are concerned, our major and the
imports,
yes, and our only export is textile. No country has made economic progress by exporting the suitings and jeans and trousers. You need to come into those major fields.
IT for that matter.
IT is in there, that's right. These three fields are the ones which you have to actually get into it. Luckily, IT has made some progress, but not enough, not yet enough. So for that, as we have just talked out, a national consensus is also required. Because if we have to continue this 5 years of election cycles, then each government desires to show some good results so that they can get votes. And then the emphasis actually shifts onto just the short-term measures, which can show you immediate results. And what happens that the long-term, the structural changes, which actually can uplift you, they go on the back burner. This is our dilemma.
And that is what
and
has
this
been
our
happening for
political
such a long
leadership
time. Yeah,
has
that's
to
correct.
put their heads together and say that we'll be fighting, we'll be quarreling on any other thing, but not on the economic front. And there has to be a national narrative, devoid of all political leanings and biases, and only aimed for national progress. And once people sit down and agree to that agenda, then no government should be able to change it. We can have many other things, but as far as the economic progress and well-being is concerned, there should be a consensus, and the path should be charted out, and each political party should sort of commit itself to follow that line, and that is the only way to progress. Otherwise, like a monkey who fell down into a well, and he would come out 3 feet and slip back 2 feet. So, it would take ages for it to come out. So, we are in that kind of situation. So, this is my humble request and suggestion, that our political leadership should put their heads together and come to a consensus roadmap for national economic development and progress.
I think that is the key now. Coming to you, Saeed Muhammad Ali, as Basit Sahab was rightly pointing out that a lot needs to be done, and there has to be proper consensus, and maturity has to be shown from all the political parties. But unfortunately, what we are witnessing these days, and even in the past, that they have so many differences regarding their own political issues that nobody talks about the economy. Looking at the current numbers, I was surprised to know that Pakistan is among one of those countries actually. They have the lowest unemployment rate, a little over 4%. I'm talking about the region again. And then you talk about the kind of exports. We are still stuck. Still, there is no product diversification, no value addition as such, no infrastructure to look after the agricultural affairs. All those who have the money and those who hold the position and the power eventually end up getting subsidized rates on fertilizer or anything else, not a regular poor farmer. That is a reality. You talk about the dollar, that's hovering well over 180. You talk about the international oil prices, again around 118, 117 because of the current Ukrainian issue. And these problems will continue, sir. Don't you think that it's high time that we need to sit, put the heads together, all the political parties should be on board, because at the end of the day, it's about Pakistan. It's not about any particular province or any particular political party, sir.
Yeah, ideally, that should have been the case. The country's been doing those, the PND, the Planning and Development Department does the 5-year, planning, which have kind of recessed into the background. And they, these efforts have to, take a lot into consideration. We are a country where, where it's an elite-led economy. Ishrat Hussain and so many others have written about this. We have institutions of the state which have no business being involved in business, having corporate interests. We have, unfortunately, going back to Mehboob Haq's articulation of the 22 families, we haven't seen, much wealth trickle down. Human development indicators are dismal. Right, and I don't know about, the ability to have sort of, sort of Teflon, a Teflon version of economic policy. But really, if we're thinking about sort of China, and its planning, but remember in China also under Mao, under the Cultural Revolution, the kind of pain that was caused, right? Like the famines, etc. And even now in China, it also has, its own set of economic problems, because the political grip has not been loosened, right? And the sort of the economic entrepreneurship that takes place is very much under the guidance of the CCP. So I wonder, the extent to which, Pakistan can have more consistent, certainly an economic vision would not hurt. I think the current government spoke about, the need for some kind of consensus across the political spectrum on climate change as well, which would have been equally sensible, and given the urgency and the economic implications and the multiple human security threats that the environment poses and climate change poses to a hotspot country like Pakistan, that certainly would not have been a bad idea. But I don't know if in the current political reality, we would have those kinds of policies. And then the debate is, what do those policies look like? Right. So when it comes to infrastructure, we do have now, under CPEC, the creation of the SEZs, for instance. Right. But those SEZs, I mean, the plan was much more ambitious than what is actually there on the ground. And those SEZs need to be activated not only by further Chinese investment, a lot of, and further indebtedness to China, but also diversified private sector, foreign direct investment, for example.
That's the way it should be.
Right, but we are not seeing a lot of that interest, right? Because of the political turmoil within the country. I mean, remember, there's no love lost for the US, but the US is still the largest export market for the US, for Pakistan. I think Pakistan also needs, to avail the opportunities that are currently existing. Right. So now, right now, if we look at sort of the international community, they are in a tight spot with Afghanistan. But rather than stubbornly insisting on the recognition of the Taliban as is and thinking of, Pakistan as a well-wisher who needs to stabilize the current Afghan government, I think that there's need to understand that, because the Taliban are also doing things which are not, to the international community's liking, like they're sort of walking back on commitment to allow secondary school education for girls. But there's an opportunity for long-term stability of Afghanistan, because humanitarian aid will not cut it for Afghanistan. And the US itself had articulated this idea of the reconstruction opportunity zone, during the Obama years, but nothing came of it. And that idea was an interesting idea, that Pakistan and Afghanistan will jointly produce products and they could be provided special access to American markets. It was a difficult ask because there's, the textile sector within the US was kind of resistant to getting these cheap textile products. And, but I think now the political dynamics have changed. And, these are the kinds of issues that Pakistan needs to be sort of, exploring, I think, more actively. And there hasn't been enough attention to these kinds of issues. Look, ultimately, even across the border, India is sort of, it's certainly its economic growth has been, and it's a much larger economy, has been much better than Pakistan. But now they are also witnessing an economic dampening, right? And that's one of the reasons why we've seen this increasing sort of xenophobia, right? Like turbo boosted xenophobia, which is still working alongside other things. It's not only hatred of the Muslims, which is allowing Modi to win, or Yogi Hannan, in UP, which is a population of 20 million, right? And he's like, 5 steps ahead of Modi. But, the way in which they use populism, the way in which they're using social welfare schemes, but it shows that economics is not the driving force necessarily. And I think in Pakistani politics also right now, and sort of, the establishment, while there's a difference between articulation of an aspiration like the geo-economic and then taking the practical steps to achieve that. And, one is not seeing a lot of effort, in turning Pakistan into a geo-economic, turning its foreign policy into one which is really concerned with the geo-economic, and geo-economic in the sense that alleviates poverty, not fills the pockets of the already have.
There were so many programs from the World Bank, from IMF, and otherwise so many countries helped Pakistan. We had this PRGF program, this growth facility and poverty reduction, but nothing has happened as such. So now, quick comment, sir, because when Mr. Nawaz Sharif, or even prior to that, Zardari Sahab was in power. So whenever I would put a question to anybody from that government, they would say that, terrorism is a problem. No investor wants to come and invest in Pakistan. Lack of energy and costly energy. So cost of doing business is also going up. These were the major, areas they used to throw light on, that because of this, Right now, sir, we hardly see any load shedding, to be very honest. I mean, there is, but it's very limited. You talk about terrorism, alhamdulillah, Pakistan Army and other law enforcement agencies, they've done a wonderful job. One issue has been sorted to an extent, but a lot more needs to be done. Iranian government is still under sanctions. I hope this P5+1 JCPOA formula works. Things get normal on that front. A lot of analysts do believe that Pakistan should do trade with India, keeping aside the issues they have, and they have got legitimate concerns. But at least let's move forward. I mean, India and China, they practically fought a limited war on the line of actual control. But what I'm saying is their bilateral trade is hitting around $100 billion. Look at China and, for that matter, United States of America. Again, biggest trading partners. Don't you think, sir, issues should be kept aside, but trade, coordination, we can do so much. Those elements are missing, unfortunately. We need to work on that.
This again has to do with our national narrative. What are our priorities?
Please go ahead, sir.
We have to actually sort out our priorities. Somehow or the other, there are many national issues which come in the fore, and the economic issues sort of go behind them. I agree with you, trade is very important. At least for a couple of years, we should concentrate on this economic progress. And I am not suggesting that we move away from our principal stands. We must maintain that. But the only thing is that we should pursue our economic goals more relentlessly, and the other things can wait. We have been waiting for 75 years for the resolutions of those problems. They are not going away, they are still there. So I think we can sort of state our principled position and then move ahead. That is one way of doing it. The second is that the CPEC seemed to be a great alternate opportunity for us, and Pakistan has been trying that other countries should also come into it. We have just had a deal with Uzbekistan, and our trading is going to be smooth, and all the customs and tariffs problems have been resolved. So this is another way, because there is a lot of potential with Central Asian republics. But no denying that America and European Union remain our main trading partners, and most of the exports end up there. So it is a tightrope walking. We have to keep good relations and yet have our principal stands, like we took one in case of Ukraine. This displeased our
the Western partners.
But you have to wait, and actually that initial furor settled down, and people realized that Pakistan what did was not out of it was not untoward something, because the next door India did the same thing. They also, not only they abstained, they are also
buying the
buyer of
oil.
Because
and interestingly, look, I mean, when I see these double standards of the West, I fail to understand what is brewing in their mind. Turkish government is a part of NATO, not a part of European Union.
True.
All right, sir?
True.
They want to make Ukraine a part of NATO, which was totally not acceptable to the Russians. Now, when the Turkish, they bought these S-400 missile defense system, they were under sanctions. They could not sell their helicopters to Pakistan. As far as their F-25s are concerned, that deal is cancelled. But when the Indians do the same, well, the lady in the White House says, well, it's okay, no sanctions for the Indians. So this is what really bothers me. But anyway, sir, thank you very much for your participation. Thank you so much for your time. And thank you so much, Syed Muhammad Ali Saab, for your time as well in our program. But before I say goodbye to our viewers, I would like to give a small tribute to a very dear friend of ours, Ambassador Arslan Rizvi Saab, who passed away last month on the 30th of January. Mr. Arslan Rizvi was an exceptional person, whether we talk in terms of his personal life or his multifaceted professional arena. In his personal life, he was a caring parent, not only for his family, but for many more that even were not related to him. If we talk about his professional life, he was again a person with exceptional skills, political as well as analytical skills. He retired from Pakistan Air Force as a squadron leader. He was one of those 2 cadets from Risalpur Air Force Academy who was selected for a 3-year training at Royal Air Force College, Cranwell, Slayford, Lincolnshire, UK, and got his wings from there as a GDP, general duty pilot. He also served as an instructor at Risalpur and also was a part of 1971 war. He served as an ADC to the late President Yahya Khan and later Prime Minister Zulfikar Ali Bhutto. Then his professional forte was further enhanced when he joined Foreign Office and retired as a polished ambassador. Now, at the same time, when we also hear about this gentleman, he helped widows of PF officers, helped needful people find jobs, and simply went out of his way to help anyone in whatever way possible. He also helped people understand the complexities of the world politics and Pakistan's role in it. He was, in the real sense, one of the best and most charismatic ambassadors of Pakistan, promoting and presenting diplomacy at its core, well-versed with in-depth knowledge on both national as well as on international affairs, with a sense of justice and integrity towards peace. May God bless his soul. Arslan Rizvi Saab, you'll be missed. He was one of those regular guests in our program, especially in my program, and what a gentleman he was. Anyway, sir, once again, thank you very much for your presence. Khuda Hafiz.